Hello and welcome to a very special episode of All Monsters Go to Space, as today we'll be theorising on a connection between the Laika films, Coraline and The Boxtrolls. But I won't be doing this theory on my own, as we have a very special guest who on her theory channel The Fangirl has already connected the Laika films Coraline, Paranorman and Kubo and the Two Strings. So please give an All Monsters Go to Space welcome to the Fangirl herself, Megan.
Thank you so much, Phil, and Danny too, and hi everybody, yes, it's really McGann, and we're really gonna have fun talking about this connection today.
So my initial theory is that the beldam is not the initial inhabitant of the other world, as the other world is a place where anything can be created, but the beldam can only imitate existing items and people in the real world, instead of creating anything original. Plus, it can only power her creations by stealing the souls of children, as we see in Coraline when she collects the souls of the ghost children, and we see the beldam's creations disintegrate. So the original inhabitants of the other world must have been extremely creative, unwilling to fight back as they would have been overthrown by the beldam, and also would have had to have been nocturnal, as the tunnel between the two worlds only appears at night. And you probably guess where I'm going with this, the Boxtrolls fit all of these aspects. But if this is the case, why did they end up in Victorian England instead of America when they got turfed out of the other world? Well, as the tunnel between the real world and the other world only appears at night, it must go somewhere during the day, maybe to another time zone, for example, like the one between the US and the United Kingdom. This could also explain why no one is surprised when the Boxtrolls are accused of stealing children, not because they are doing so, but another creature, for example, the beldam, was. This could also tie into your the beldam took other kids theory that you put up recently, began, also meaning that there are many more victims of the beldam that we've never seen. But now we come to the more wild part of this theory, that Coraline and the Boxtrolls may somewhat take place in the same time. Strange, I know, as Coraline is set in modern times, and the Boxtrolls is set in Victorian Britain. But maybe as the tunnel moves between countries, it could also travel through time as well, as the tunnel and the other world do not conform to the rules of our reality. This could explain the Coraline button box design that we see in the front of one of the Boxtrolls, that reads Buttons, Coraline and Co. But what do you think, Megan?
Well, I think the most important question to ponder first is, why would the Boxtrolls have ever left the other world? I mean, they aren't really well received in Cheesebridge, and I assume they lived in the other world for a very long time, making it likely that the Boxtrolls didn't have any natural predators or enemies there. We can also note that there doesn't seem to be any feminine trolls, meaning they can't reproduce. That implies that the Boxtrolls are immortal. Well, sort of immortal. Unless you physically kill them, they don't die from aging alone, if there's a proper term for that. Oh, and we do see one baby Boxtroll called Oil, but maybe he's been small for a very long time. Or maybe the trolls have an asexual way to reproduce. It just happens more slowly than other biological animals. But to get back to the question, why would the Boxtrolls ever leave their homeland? Well, the simple answer is that the beldam arrived and changed the world around them. Not only would the beldam's ability to manipulate the Boxtrolls' reality be extremely intimidating for them, but the beldam is a very coercive and abusive entity, meaning one way or another, she may have gotten the Boxtrolls to work as her minions. Actually, meeting the beldam in person may help explain the trolls' timid nature, as she was their first experience with an outside creature, so now the trolls are extra afraid of all outsiders. And keep in mind that the Coraline film shows the beldam heavily relying on mice to do her bidding in the real world, and eventually we're shown that the mice are actually rats, and not even real rats, as they're more like dolls filled with sand. These were minions that the beldam created herself to be as subservient as possible, and perhaps she did that because her free-willed minions were too unreliable. We can also note that the beldam seems to have a limitation to make things out of other objects or patterns, not her own concoctions, so she would not have been clever enough to design the Boxtrolls herself, even if she had that ability. So either the beldam forced the Boxtrolls to leave the other world, or they became afraid of the beldam so they moved out on their own. Or a third possibility, maybe the trolls refused to abduct children for her and went into hiding. In some ways I lean towards the last option because that would mix in well with why the Boxtrolls use boxes. Well, maybe they do that because they are constantly in hiding from the beldam, in addition to not wanting to disturb the humans in Cheesebridge. There's also a possibility that the trolls begin using boxes for a modesty issue. They are really shy beings, and in the other world, they may have been able to think about clothing and have it appear on their body. So, living in the real world, these poor trolls have no idea how to dress themselves, so they ended up wearing discarded odds and ends until one day they figured out that, hey, boxes last longer and help them sneak around or hide in plain sight. Then we have the bizarre issue of one troll wearing a Coraline button box, which doesn't make sense because Coraline takes place over 100 years in the future. Okay, this could be a nod to another film that Laika made, but this is not an Easter egg channel, it's a theory channel, and well, that's where the tunnels come in. I have often believed that the tunnels are moving around and changing, which is why sometimes they have the pretty blue-purple lights, and other times we see cobwebs and abandoned toys in there. But let's consider the idea that the tunnels leading out of the other world are out of sync with normal time. For instance, how do we know that an hour in the other world is an hour in the real world? How do we know it's not like Narnia where you could live an entire lifetime and only a few minutes pass by at home? Or the opposite, what if an hour in the other world is a day, a week, a month in real world time? We see Coraline return home at one point after being gone for maybe a few hours, and the groceries that her mom just bought are all rotted. Okay, maybe the milk could turn within a few hours, but not the fruit. Something has never added up about how the other world behaves, and that could be because we assume that time matches up with the real world. Maybe the issue is that the other world exists outside of normal time and the tunnels can go forward or backward in time, perhaps through the Beldam's control and perhaps not. That notion could cover how the Beldam made a doll of Coraline before Coraline moved into the Pink Palace, and it could cover why the Boxtrolls have an item that doesn't fit within their timeline.
Your idea that the portal changes during the course of Coraline due to us seeing the same portal during different time periods makes so much sense and really helps us cement the time-travelling idea. I also find it really interesting that the Beldam may have made the Boxtrolls as her original minions, and definitely explains their timid nature. Plus, the Beldam and the Boxtrolls are similar in one aspect. They both have a diet of bugs and insects. And as you pointed out, the fact that we see no female trolls definitely indicate that they were created rather than born. However, as we both mentioned, this seems unlikely as the Beldam seems incapable of creating anything new or original, and has to rely on imitating things that already exist. I also really love your idea that the reason why the Boxtrolls wear boxes is because in the other world they would have been able to imagine up their own clothes. Just to expand upon this theory though, I do have an explanation as to where Cheesebridge may be located, as I think it may be crucial to linking the Boxtrolls to the other Laika films, as you mentioned, in the other Laika films, the supernatural world exists, for example, ghosts, zombies, gods, but only a small amount of people seem to be aware of their existence. Whereas in the Boxtrolls, the whole population of Cheesebridge is very aware of the Boxtrolls' existence, and this made me think of an island in the Irish Sea between Ireland and Britain, called the Isle of Man, a place where the Queen is still the head of state, but the island is independently governed, being able to make up their own laws. For example, they don't have speed limits and you only pay 10% tax, but they do have laws in place to protect what's known as the little people. For example, fairies, goblins and trolls, as there they are considered to be real creatures, with empty buildings not even being torn down, so these creatures can use them as homes.
And the idea of the Isle of Man really helps reconcile several issues in Boxtrolls because it's so different and stylized from other Laika films. With Boxtrolls, the paranormal is the average reality for people, whereas in Coraline, Kubo and the Two Strings, and Paranorman, we have themes of most characters not believing that the supernatural events have occurred. So even though the Boxtrolls are set in Victorian Britain, the fact that they're on an island means that the people would be isolated with their own cultures and belief systems that develop over time. So in Cheesebridge, the abnormal to the rest of the world, like trolls and a hat-based hierarchy system, is an everyday occurrence there. Another detail that you just pointed out is that the Beldam and the Boxtrolls are both eating insects, which would be creatures small enough to wander into the portal holes of the other world, so there are probably real insects all over the place, and that would make sense to use for a food source. Plus, that would explain why we see cobwebs in various places in Coraline Coraline because the beldam is unable to keep bugs out of the other world.
Okay, so let's just recap everything we've established today. The Boxtrolls came from the other world, whether they were the original inhabitants or the beldam's original minions. We've also established why the portal's appearance changes throughout the course of Coraline, and the potential location of Cheesebridge. So I think the only thing left to say is a big thank you to Megan for working on this theory with me. It's been great working with you as always.
No, Phil, thank you so much for having me on here today. It's fun to do something different every so often. I hope the rest of you had fun with us, and thank you so much for watching.
So I've left links on screen to the Fangirl's Laika theory videos, as well as in the description. I've also left a link to her channel there as well. So as always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to watch the Fangirl's Laika theories, and subscribe to her channel, and I'll see you in the comment section and on Twitter.